After finally firing Nadhim Zahawi for not paying his taxes, Rishi Sunak tries to shrug it off and then celebrates the 3-year anniversary of Brexit. When Starmer points out that it was national news in July last year, so a month before Sunak made him a minister, that Nadhim Zahawi was being investigated for his taxes,
no issues were raised with me at the time of his appointment.
Does "I didn't know my minister was being investigated by the National Crime Agency" sound a little bit like "I didn't know I was at a party"? And he says he
appointed independent advisor as soon as I was made aware of new information.
He wanted to say "as soon as I was made aware of the issue," but he can't say that because it was national news. When it's pointed out that Transparency International, the global anti-corruption charity, found that the UK is one of only 5 countries in the world that had gotten more corrupt this last year, Rishi Sunak says there's
widespread recognition and support for the UK's approach to transparency and indeed tackling corruption.
Imagine bragging about your reputation on corruption a week after you had to fire the ex-tax minister for breaking tax law. And who does he use to back him up?
The most recent report from the FATF body commended the UK for the steps that it had taken.
Yeah, no, Transparency International is the main authority on government corruption. You know, like giving billions in dodgy contracts to your Tory mates. The Financial Action Task Force focuses on money laundering and terrorist financing, so thanks for not buying anthrax? And on the government's new anti-strike laws,
he voted this week with the unions to oppose minimum safety levels.
But even without the strikes, there aren't minimum safety levels, because we've been seeing 1,000 excess deaths a week in an NHS that your party's been running for the last 13 years. That's why NHS staff are going on strike. Here we go.
Since Brexit, the UK has grown exactly the same as Germany has.
The UK had the deepest recession in 2020 and now is the only G7 economy that hasn't recovered to pre-pandemic levels. So the only way that makes sense is if he's using his failure in 2020 to pad the numbers as to how far we've come since.
We are taking advantage of Brexit to deliver for the people across the UK, whether it's the fishing and farming communities of Scotland.
Is that the Scottish salmon fishers who say that Brexit is costing them £11 million, or the Scottish Farmers Union who say that Brexit is crippling them?
The number one factor that is impacting people's living standards, inflation, it's got nothing to do with Brexit.
Inflation is about how much our pound can buy, right? And who's in charge of our currency? Oh yeah, the Bank of England. And what have they said? Oh yeah, that Brexit has already added 6% to the cost of food.
And we do have a small business test to consider whether the impacts of regulatory changes will disproportionately affect small and micro businesses. I will make sure that we are applying that test rigorously.
So you'll be rejoining the EU then, right? Because the Federation of Small Businesses has already said that Brexit is strangling them. Join us next week when Rishi Sunak explains how nobody told him about the 24 bullying complaints against his Deputy Prime Minister Domimic Raab.